Hello class and welcome to Unit 1. This is a quick video on what you are going to be talking about this week. I'm Trish. I am going to be your instructor for the next 6 weeks, and this is by far one of my favorite classes, mostly because not only is this a really good class for your career, it's also a really good class for your life. It's one of those classes that you'll take a lot of these skills and applying them to a lot of everyday lives. And I remember the very first time I took a negotiation class that was on a more advanced level was about 10 or 11 years ago. And the individual who was teaching it talked about the 1-2 punch. And it's a tactic that I took out of that class, and I actually had a situation that came up the very following week where I was able to apply it. It saved me $1,500. And so what that situation was, or what the 1-2 punch is that it's the flinch. It's the ooh, ah, sort of thing. And it's when somebody proposes something in a situation for you. And so that your reaction automatically, regardless of what they say, is to go, oof, you flinch. It's the flinch. And so it was a situation where that's Mark, my dog, by the way. You'll see Mark and Herky frequently throughout our videos. So what the situation was is I had the sewer line from my house to the street had collapsed. It was an older pipe that was made out of clay, and our tree branch in our front yard had actually at one point gone through and had broken the pipe. And if you know anything about plumbing and sewer lines, that is not exactly something that you want to happen. And so had a company come out, gave us an estimate. He told me how much it cost, and I went, oof, and I flinched. And then I proposed a new number, and that number was $1,500 lower than what he had actually said. Now, I had anticipated that he would be willing to come down probably around $1,000, and I wanted to start high so that we could reach that middle ground, create a win-win situation. But he actually agreed to the first amount, which kind of made me wonder, like, how much more could I have maybe asked for before we had to negotiate back and forth. But that's the type of things that we're going to talk about in this class. We might be talking about negotiations from something very small, such as negotiating with a significant other or your kid. We might talk about job negotiations. We might be talking about when you negotiate to buy a car, or getting work done on your house, or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about that you can apply to your everyday life, both at work and outside of work as well. So a couple of things that I just want to talk about in our introduction video here is, first off, what is a negotiation? Negotiation is a win-win strategy. That's what you're looking for, is a win-win strategy that both parties are involved. So first off, to have negotiation, there has to be a couple of things. Number one is that there has to be 2 or more interested parties. Now, that doesn't determine the number of people, it just determines the number of parties. And so you have to have 2 or more parties that want something different. The next thing is that you have to have a conflict. Now, a conflict is not necessarily a negative, and so I want to make sure that we understand what conflict truly means here. Conflict means that there's just a situation that's unresolved in some way, shape, or form. It could actually be a positive conflict. It could be where you going on vacation for the year. It could be, negotiating a better package at work, but there's an unresolved issue, and that's what we mean by when we say there's conflict. So you've got 2 or more interested parties, you've got an unresolved issue, and you need to come to terms on how everybody leaves the table happy. That's what a negotiation is. Now, I need to look up the exact wording, but there's a funny quote that says essentially like an effective negotiation is when everybody leaves unhappy. And sometimes I wonder if there isn't some truth to that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So as you're going through this week in your Unit 1 discussion board, what you're mainly going to discuss are two components. Number one is BANTA, B-A-T-N-A. I always want to say BANTA, and I get the T and the N reversed there. But what it means is the best alternative to negotiated agreement. So what that means, best alternative to a negotiated agreement, means that if we don't get this resolved, what happens, okay? If we don't get this resolved, what happens on my part, what happens on your part, sort of thing here. So let's go back to my sewer line example. What happens if that contractor and I were not able to come to an agreement? Well, what happens on my end? I've got a busted sewer pipe, right? Like this can't keep going, okay? I suppose it could, but it's not going to, okay? So that contractor knows that I need this fixed. He knows that my alternative is that I've got sewage in my house, I've got sewage in my front yard. This isn't gonna fly, okay? Now, what I know about him is that if we can't get to an agreement, that I can call somebody else. He's not the only game in town, and so I'm looking at it from, well, we need to come to an agreement, or I can give my business to somebody else, and he's looking at it from, well, she really needs this to happen. So we both equally need each other when it comes to this. It's just who needs each other more badly. Now, that's not always something that we know. Now, he knows, and I'm using he because it was a male that I was working with. He knows that I needed this fixed because there's sewage, right? But what I don't know about him, and it would be really hard for me to actually find out, is how was business at the time? Now, here's what I do know. This actually happened, like I said, years and years ago, but it happened in January. And that tends to be a slower month for these types of repairs. So I also happen to know his business was kind of slow. And so knowing that he needed money, I needed a sewer agreement or a sewer fix, that's why we were able to come to an agreement, because we both knew that the alternative for the other one was something that we really didn't want. I wanted to fix, he wanted money. There might be other alternatives where they're not nearly as severe. So for example, I went and negotiated a car, and which is something I'm sure almost everybody in this class has done. Didn't need the car, and it was a situation where really liked it, thought it was great, but I truly had a hard dollar amount. That was all that I was willing. I wasn't even willing to go $50 more. It didn't matter. That was it. And we ended up being about $400 off, and I just walked away from it because my alternative was that I still had a very, very reliable, safe, usable vehicle. It was just something prettier, shinier, new bells, but at the same point, I knew what my hard number is. So sometimes you need to know, what does the other party have to lose? Because if they don't have anything to lose, then negotiations on your part become a little bit more difficult, because you got to find what that pain point is. You got to find what is the problem that this negotiation is going to solve for that person. And if that's what you really want to know going into an effective negotiation is, what's the ultimate outcome that they need, okay? What can you negotiate in here that is going to solve a problem for them? Remember, with negotiations, depending on who's negotiating, they don't care about your problem. They don't care about your conflict. They care about theirs. And so when you are effectively negotiating, how can you solve something for them that gets you what you want as well? And that's what we're going to be looking at here. So other things that you're going to talk about in your discussion board is claiming, or value claiming, or value creation. And so what you're going to read about and learn about is that most negotiations are a combination of the two. So the value to claim is doing what is ever necessary to claim the reward or the largest piece of the negotiation. Creating value is a way for all parties to meet the goal and share the reward. Sometimes you want to win the biggest part of it possible. Sometimes you want everybody to win as much as you can. Most of the time, it's going to be a combination of the two. So as you're going through your discussion board today or throughout this week, that is what you're going to be focusing on as you discuss those questions. Your due dates for this week, you have 3 main assignments this week. Number 1 is your introduction discussion board. Please make sure that you actually read the discussion board and that you answer the questions that are in it. I know that you have an introductory discussion board about yourself every single class, and there's copying and pasting, which is totally cool, down with that, but you do need to address the questions that are in this specific discussion board in order for you to obtain the points, all the points for it. I do take a look at those. If it's a direct copy and paste and you didn't answer anything that was in there, or you miss half of it, then your grade will be adjusted accordingly. So make sure you take some time to update that. The next component is that you do have your discussion board, Unit 1 discussion board, the big discussion board for the week. The initial responses for both of those are due on Wednesday. In addition to that, your peer responses are due on Sunday. Make sure that you review the rubric on in the resources so that you know how you are graded for this class. One thing I'd like to point out is that doing the bare minimum is not A work. Doing the bare minimum is really middle of the road work. And so if you're, just giving you an example here, if the minimum requirement for your response is 250 words and you write 255, you met the requirement. You didn't exceed it. You met the requirement. So as you're looking at what type of grade do you want in this course, really be looking at, okay, what's the next thing that I have to do? So I look at grading as I do if I were evaluating your job performance. So let's say that you were one of my sales associates and your job was to sign 5 contracts a month, and you signed 5 contracts a month. That's great, okay? You're gonna keep your job, but you're not getting a bonus, okay? It's sort of the same mentality there. If your job is to sign 5 contracts and you sign 10, well, whoo, boy, you're gonna be rewarded accordingly. So the same kind of philosophy goes when it comes to grading as well. The next one up is that you have your Unit 1 case study, also due on Sunday. And then finally, make sure you're watching the announcement board, because I will be posting announcements. I post a lot of announcements. I post usually 3 to 4 a week, depending on kind of what we have going on there. But the one thing that you want to watch out for is that you're actually going to be paired up with another classmate, and you are going to be looking at an assignment that's due in Unit 2. Now, I do encourage you to get started on it in Unit 1, because I highly recommend that you all do a phone call. I truly think that it's going to be the fastest for you. Part of what I tried to do as your instructor is I tried to say, okay, what's the most value, what's the most bang for your buck here? And I've been doing this long enough that I know the different questions that you're going to have before you have them. I know the different obstacles that you're going to have before you have them, because I've done it and I've seen it, and patterns develop themselves. And I will say that when it comes to doing your peer-to-peer assignment that you're going to do here, that if you set up a phone call, you can hammer out what you need to hammer out in probably 30 minutes or less. Whereas if you try to do it over emails and whatnot, you'll spend a heck of a lot more time trying to communicate and then waiting on the other person to respond and yada, yada, yada. So we'll try. So that's just my recommendation, if it's possible. If not, use whatever technology is available for you. Because to me, it doesn't matter how you get done, just got to get it done. So I will be pairing you up, and you'll see your name of who you're going to be working with there as well. That's all I have for Unit 1. Hope you enjoyed this. As you can tell, this is my home office. This is primarily where I work out of, which is one of the most greatest benefits and perks of my life. In addition to that, a lot of times I get to work in what you're seeing here, and so I love yoga pants and I love comfy sweatshirts, and so I'll bring it to you from wherever I'm at on that day. So I'm looking forward to an awesome class. Let me know if you have any questions. I am online daily with the exception of Sundays, and I look forward to an awesome Unit 1. Take care, everyone.